One might argue that if Eloin had simply stayed home from the seeding, none of what came after would have happened at all. But then again, if the Alpha King had done the naming with his own mouth, the way every king of Vilemore before him had done it, she would never have needed to go. So really, when one thought it through properly, the whole ruin of it was his fault, every part. Eloin Ash was chief tracker of Ardenhold, which meant she spent most of her life with her face close to the ground, and very little of it in rooms where people watched her. She was not a woman who sat at high tables. She had been given a place at one anyway, because custom held that the chief tracker sat at the king's left hand on the night of the seating, and custom had never once thought to ask Eloin what she wanted. "You have stopped breathing again," said Tamsin. "I am breathing. You are standing there like a post." Somebody drove into the floor. Tamsin had been reading Scent for 20 years longer than Eloin, and had earned the right to say whatever she liked. "Sit. You look like a woman waiting to be sentenced." Eloin sat and put her hands flat on the table so they would stop doing what they wanted to do. The great hall had been scrubbed and hung and lit until it did not look like itself. Crushed pine sat over 400 bodies in their good clothes, and under it the iron smell of the old stone. Eloin catalogued it without meaning to. She always did. It was the only thing about her anyone had ever needed. At the head of the hall stood 2 chairs. The first was the throne, black wood and worn arms, and it had held the Alphas of Valemore since before there were records to say so. The second sat at its right, smaller, plain to the point of severity. That was the Luna's chair. It had stood empty for 11 years, since the old queen died in the same hard winter that took her husband, and in all that time, nobody had so much as leaned against it. Tonight, it would be filled. That was what a seating was. The Alpha King spoke a name. The woman it belonged to crossed the floor, and he set his own hand on her shoulder and put her in the chair. After that, the thing was done, and no council and no house and no law in the realm could undo it. Eloin had told herself all autumn that it would not be her name, and she had been disciplined about it. She was the chief tracker. She had a crooked nose from a bad landing at 17, and hands that had never once been soft. Kings did not put women like her in chairs. The trouble was that Casimir had spent a year making the discipline very hard. He had come to the tracker's lodge in the rain to ask about a lame horse, and stayed until the fire went out. He had learned the names of her dogs. He had sat on an upturned crate in the mud of the kennel yard, the Alpha King of all Valemore, and argued with her about road tolls until she forgot to be careful with him. He had never once said a word she could hold up as a promise. That was the worst of it. He had simply been there, over and over, until his absence had begun to feel like weather. The horns went. The hall stood, and Eloin stood with it, and her heart went somewhere up behind her teeth. King Casimir came up the length of the hall without hurrying. He was tall and dark-headed, and he moved the way water moves, and the room turned toward him the way a field turns toward light, because that was what he was, and there had never been any arguing with it. He reached the dais. He put one hand on the back of the empty chair, and then he did not speak. The herald did. Eloin felt it before she understood it. The paper was the wrong thing entirely, because a naming came out of the king's own mouth. It always had. A name spoken aloud by an alpha carried weight no paper could hold. The herald read from the paper, "Undine of the Calder Pax." The hall made a sound, not a cheer, something lower and stranger, 400 people breathing in at once. Eloin did not move. She had spent her life learning to be still when something was wrong, and she was very good at it, and she was still now, perfectly, while the floor of her life went out from under her. Undine of the Calderpax came out of the crowd. She was small and pale, gold and lovely in the way that made people move aside without deciding to. And she was, Eloin thought distantly, about 19 years old. She crossed half the floor, and Eloin, who could not help what her nose did any more than she could help her own pulse, caught the scent coming off the girl, and felt the night tilt sideways. It was fear. not nerves. Not the bright flutter of a young woman walking into the largest moment of her life, in front of 400 strangers. This was the flat, cold reek of an animal in a snare, pouring off Undine of the Calder packs like smoke off green wood. Eowyn turned to look at the king. Casimir was already looking at her. He had not looked at the girl, not at the hall, or the herald, or the paper. He stood on the dais with his hand on the back of the Luna's chair and his eyes on Eowyn Ash at the far end of the high table. And his face was the most terrible thing she had ever seen on a man, and she had no name for what was in it. Then the hall turned. That was the part she would remember. Not the paper, not the name. The slow, ugly ripple as 400 people worked out there was somewhere better to look than at the girl crossing the floor, and every last one of them looked at Eowyn instead. Tamsin's hand closed hard around her wrist under the table. "Do not," Tamsin said very low, "do not give them it." But Eowyn was already standing. She did it the way she did everything, without hurry and without noise. She set her napkin down because her hands wanted a job. Then she walked the length of the great hall of Ardenhold with the whole of Vale Moor, watching her go, and she did not stumble, and she did not look at the dais. And she got out through the doors into the cold before her face did anything she could not take back. Behind her, at the high table, on the king's left hand, her chair stood empty. She was 12 paces into the courtyard when the noise started. Nothing like applause. It came up out of the hall in one great, ragged shout, and under it the crack of something wooden going over, and someone near the doors sang, "Oh gods," over and over. Eowyn stopped. The king had spoken. She knew the sound of his voice through a wall, the way she knew her own dog's. He had said something after the naming, something short, and the hall had come apart over it. She stood in the freezing dark, with the pine smell still in her hair, and understood that whatever had just been said in that room was the most important thing anyone had ever said about her life. And she was the only person in Vilemore who had not heard it. The Tracker's Lodge sat at the low end of the hold, downwind of everything, which was how Eowyn had always liked it. She got the door shut behind her and stood in the dark of her own front room and made herself count her breathing until it stopped being ridiculous. Then she lit the fire because her hands needed a job and put the kettle on because they still did, and had got as far as taking off her good coat when the door opened without a knock. "Right," said Corbett, who was 19 and had never knocked in his life. "So, go away. I cannot. Tamsin sent me." He was pink to the ears and out of breath. "She said you should not be alone." "That is what I told her." Corbett straightened. Whatever he saw on her face made him stop being 19 for a moment. "Are you all right?" "No," Eowyn said. "Sit down." The kettle began to complain over the fire, and Eowyn took 2 cups down and set them on the table and discovered she could not remember what she had meant to do with them. "Corbett, what did he say?" Corbett went the color of a man who has walked into a room and found it full of water. "Ah," he said. "He said something after the name. I heard the hall go up. He did say something." "Corbett, I would truly rather Tamsin told you." The door opened again, and Tamsin came in with the cold still on her shoulders. "He would truly rather I told her," Tamsin agreed. Eowyn put both hands on the back of a chair. "One of you." Now Tamsin came to the fire. She was not a woman who softened things. She had told a mother her son was dead standing in that same spot, and had done it plainly, and it had been kinder than kindness. "He named the Calder girl," Tamsin said. The herald read it. "You saw that much. I saw it." Then he sent the herald away. She looked at Eowyn steadily. The girl came up and stood in front of the chair and waited, the way you do, for him to put his hand on her shoulder and sit her down. And he stood there, a good, long while. Eowyn, long enough that the hall began to understand something was wrong. The kettle screamed. Nobody moved to take it off. And then he took his hand off the back of the chair, Tamsin said, and stepped away from it, and said, "Let it stand cold." Eowyn heard the words go into her, and find nothing to attach to. Let it stand cold, she repeated. His exact words. Then he went out through the side door and left 400 people and a foreign king's daughter standing in the middle of his own hall. He named her and would not seat her. He named her and would not seat her. Corbett said into the silence. She is still up there. They found her a room in the east wing. Nobody knows what to call her. She is named and not seated, so she is not the Luna, only she is also not nothing. And the steward has had to invent a way of bowing that does not commit him to anything. Eloan took the kettle off at last, mostly to have somewhere to put her hands. It does not work like that, she said. A naming that is not seated does not simply sit there. It lapses. It lapses, Tamsin agreed. At the end of the ember moon, 40 nights from tonight. If he has not put her in that chair by the last dark of it, the naming fails and the choosing goes to the council, and the council will hand him whichever daughter has bought the most of it. She let that sit. House Sorrel has been buying for a year. Then why name her at all? That is the question the whole of Vilemore is asking tonight, and you are the only one in it who has not been handed a theory yet. There was a heavy tread outside, and the door opened a third time and Halvard came in. He had raised her. That was the plain fact of it. He had found her at 11 years old sleeping under the granary steps with a dead mother and a father nobody could name, and he had put a coat on her and fed her and given her the one thing in the world she had ever been any good at. Master of the ward, of Ardenhold, gray now, big through the shoulders still, and the sight of him in her doorway undid something 400 staring faces had not managed. Girl, he said, do not. If you are kind to me, I will not be able to stand it. Then I will not be kind. He took the cup Corbett had abandoned and turned it over in his hands. You will hear a great deal in the next few days. That he meant to name you, and lost his nerve. That the Calder girl bought him. Listen to none of it, and go back to work in the morning. Halvard, there is nothing in that hall for you. He said it gently, and meant it gently, and it went in like a splinter going the wrong way. You have the finest nose in Valemore. That is a rarer thing than a chair. You have never needed the dais, and the dais has never deserved you. Let them have their pageant. Come back to the road. She wanted to lean into it. She always had. It was the shape of every comfort he had ever given her, and it fitted her exactly, and she had never once in 20 years asked why a comfort should fit that well. He looked at me, she said when the herald read it. He was looking straight at me. Halvard's hands went still on the cup. That is a dangerous thing to have noticed, he said. Eloan was about to ask what he meant by it. She got as far as opening her mouth. Then, every dog in the kennel yard began to bark at once. Not the ragged noise they made at a fox on the wall. All of them, together in one voice, the way they only ever did, for one thing. Corbett was up out of his chair. Tamsin had gone to the window. Halvard set the cup down very slowly on the table. Because an alpha was coming down the hill toward the tracker's lodge, and there was only one alpha in Vilemore. The door of the lodge was not tall enough for him and never had been. Casimir came through it with his head bowed, and the knight still on his shoulders, and the room changed. Eloan felt it in her spine before she finished turning. Her own wolf came up under her skin and put its head down without asking her. Beside her, Corbett had gone to one knee, and Tamsin had gone very straight, and Halvard had stopped breathing. She had known him a year. She had never once, until this moment, stood in a small room with what he actually was. Up, Casimir said to Corbett. Then to the room, all of you out, your grace. Halvard did not move. Whatever is to be said to my tracker can be said in front of me. Eloan looked at him. In 20 years, she had never heard him refuse the crown anything. Kennet, Casimir said, she is in my charge. She is chief tracker of Ardenhold. She is 31 years old, and she has not been in anybody's charge for a long while. He had never in his life needed to raise his voice. Out, master of the ward! You may wait in the yard if it eases you. Halvard went. He put a hand on Eowyn's shoulder as he passed, and squeezed once, and she took a strange cold comfort from it that she did not examine. The door shut, and Eowyn found she had nothing at all to say to him. Eowyn, your grace, he flinched. She saw it go through him and was glad, in a low, mean way she was not proud of. Do not do that. It is your title. You have never once used it. I have never once watched you name another woman in front of the whole realm. Her voice came out perfectly level, which surprised her. So we are both learning things tonight. Casimir shut his eyes. When he opened them, what was left was the king. And it was very well done, and she hated how well it was done. I have come to give you a post, he said. I have a post. You will have another. From tonight, you are warden of the person of the Lady Ondine of the Calderpax. He laid it down like a card. You will be at her shoulder, waking and sleeping. You will taste what she eats, walk the ground before she walks it, sleep across her door. You will answer to me and to no one else in this hold, not the steward, not the council. A small pause. Eowyn stood very still. Say that again. You heard it. I want to hear whether you can say it twice. She came round the table toward him. You want me. The woman whose chair stood empty in front of 400 people tonight. You want me to guard the woman you put in the hall instead of me. Yes. Give me the reason. She is 19 years old and foreign-born, and she has been named Luna in a hold that has spent 11 years waiting to hate whoever came next. He met her eyes without flinching now. There have been threats since the Calder party crossed the border. I need the best tracker in Vilemore at her shoulder, and there is no argument in this realm against that, because it is simply true. And there it was, airtight. The sort of reason a man says in council and watches every head nod. It had been built for exactly that, in advance, by somebody who had been thinking about it far longer than tonight. It was also a lie. A Luna's warden is chosen by the Luna, Eowyn said. Casimir did not answer. That is the law, and a very old one. She picks her own, never the king. Because the whole purpose of the post is that she has one sword in this hold that is not yours. Eowyn watched his face. You have not asked her. You have not even told her. No, so you are not protecting her. She took another step. You are putting me somewhere, and you want me somewhere. The master of the ward cannot ask me what I saw. Something moved behind his eyes then, fast and bright, and it was not anger. It looked horribly like relief. Take the post, he said. Give me one true thing first. Tonight you took your hand off that chair in front of the whole realm and said let it stand cold. Tell me why and I will do anything you ask of me. For a moment she thought he would. His jaw worked, his hand came half up toward her, the way a man reaches for something without deciding to, and stopped in the air between them, and went down again. I cannot, he said, cannot, will not, then, if that is easier to hate. He turned toward the fire, and his voice came flat with exhaustion. Ask me in 40 nights. The door opened behind them. Halvard came back in without being asked, mud on his boots and a lamp in his hand. Forgive me, your grace. The runner is in from the Sorrel Road. Old Bassett went off the shale at the high bend. Eowyn turned. Bassett drove that road for 30 years, in the dark, in the wet, drunk, all 30 of them. He does not go off the shale. He went off it tonight, and the cart with him? I would like your leave to double the ward, your grace. That is the second man off the high bend since midsummer, and I do not care for it. Casimir did not turn round from the fire. A bad bend and a wet night, he said. Double the ward if it eases you. And Eowyn, who had spent her whole life reading things off the ground, stood in her own front room and watched the back of the Alpha King of Valemore, and thought, with perfect clarity, that a man who was not afraid would have turned round. Halvard bowed and went out, and the lamplight went with him. Warden, Casimir said. To the fire. Eowyn closed her eyes. Yes, come to the dais at moonrise tomorrow before the hold is up. Not to the hall, to the chair. He turned round at last, and looked at her the way he had looked at her from the dais, with his hand on the empty chair, and she still had no name for it. "Because I need you to see something," said the king, "and once you have seen it, you will not be able to unsee it, and I am sorry for that in advance." Moonrise in the ember moon came at the black end of the night, which meant Eloan crossed the great hall at an hour when even the bakers were still asleep. It was a different room without people in it. The greenery was down, the trestles stacked against the wall, and the whole space smelled of cold ash and spilled wine. Her own boots sounded ridiculous on the stone. Dequaid. Dax Gazimir was already on the dais, a single lamp, and no crown, and no guard, sitting on the steps below the throne, with his forearms on his knees, like a man waiting outside a sick room. "You came," he said. "You gave me an order. I gave you an invitation. There is a difference, and you are choosing not to know it." Eloan came up the steps and stopped a careful arm's length from him. Above them the two chairs stood side by side, in the dark, and she had a childish urge not to look at the second. "Show me," she said. Casimir stood. He took the lamp and held it up over the Luna's chair. "Read it," he said. Eloan went very still. "What? You are the finest nose in Valemore. Everyone in this hold has said so for years, including you," while shouting at me about road tolls. He was not smiling. "Read the chair." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she took off her gloves, got down on her knees in front of the empty seat, and did her job. It came up at her in layers, the way it always did. Wax and old oil first, because someone had polished it for the seating. Then the wood, oak cut before her grandmother was born. Then the girl. Ondine was all through the front of it, the same scent Eloan had caught crossing the floor. That flat, cold reek of something in a snare, soaked into the grain the way fear does. She was terrified, Eloan said. Yes, not nervous. Terrified. Eloan moved along the arm, breathing shallow and slow. "You are all over it as well, but that is nothing. You had your hand on the back of it half the night. Keep going." She went round to the side and put her face close to the join, where the arm met the seat, where a hand would go if a hand were reaching underneath, and she stopped. Eloan, quiet. She got down flat and worked her way under, and lay on her back beneath the Luna's chair of Vilemore, with the lamp throwing the shape of it across the ceiling, and breathed. It was faint. Under everything older than the polish. Older than the girl. "There is a third," she said. Above her Casimir let out a breath he had plainly been holding since before she arrived. "Tell me." "Cold iron beeswax, but not the polish. The kind you seal with." She turned her head. "And a man. Not a servant. Servants smell of the work of lye and grease and the passages they walk. This one smells of nothing at all, which takes effort." He handled the underside of this chair with bare hands and then went away and washed. "When?" "A fortnight before the seating. Perhaps more." She came out from under the chair and sat back on her heels. "Somebody was at this chair before you ever named her, Casimir, and he did not want to be smelled." He crouched in front of her so their eyes were level, and the lamp put half of him in light. "Now you know why I could not send the ward," he said, "or the steward, or a tracker who answers to any man in this hold but me. That is the shape of an answer, not an answer." She did not move away from him. "Give me the rest." Gotch Casimir looked at the chair for a while. "I did not choose Ondine of the Calderpacks," he said. Eloan's whole body went quiet. "Say that plainly. A month before the seating something was put in front of me. I am not going to tell you what it was, and you may hate me for that as much as you like." His voice had gone very level, which, she was learning, was the sound of him at the end of his rope. "I was given a name, and told to speak it, and told what would happen in this realm if I did not, so I let the herald read it, because I could not make my own mouth do it. And then I stood there with my hand on that chair, and worked out 4 heartbeats before I had to move. That seating her was the part that mattered, not the naming. The seating. Whatever they built, the chair finishes it. So you would not finish it." So I would not finish it, he shrugged, and the exhaustion in it was worse than anger. Let it stand cold. It was the only move I had. It cost me the only thing I actually wanted, and 400 people have looked at me, since like I have lost my reason. Aloan sat in the dark with her hands loose in her lap and felt something enormous shift its weight inside her. She had come here to be told a lie. She had been braced for it the whole walk across the hall. Then we find him, she said. Gatchmir's head came up. The man under the chair. He touched it a fortnight before. He sealed something, and he took the trouble to wash. Aloan was on her feet now, and her voice had changed, and she did not notice it changing. Who holds the keys to this dais? The steward Osgood. Then Osgood keeps a book, because stewards always keep a book, and it will say who came in here in the fortnight before and what for. She was already moving down the steps, thinking out loud, the way she did on a cold trail. The polish was done 4 days out. Anyone in here after it leaves a hand on top. He is under. He came early, and he knew the polish was coming. To bury him. Aloan. And sealing wax means a document, which is gone now, because I would smell paper, and I do not. So, somebody came back for it. She stopped at the bottom of the steps and realized he had not followed. What? Casimir stood on the dais with the lamp in his hand, looking down at her, and his face had done something she had never seen it do. Nothing, he said. Go on. Do not look at me like that. Like what? Like I have done a trick. It came out sharper than she meant. I am reading a floor. It is not a trick, and I have spent a year trying to tell you so in ways that did not put a target on your back. He came down the steps. The steward will not open his book for you. He barely opens it for me. Then give me something that makes him. Casimir took a ring off his hand and held it out. Aloan looked at it and did not take it. That is the ward seal. It is. From this hour, you go anywhere in Ardenhold that I could go. Any door, any book, you may put any man in this hold against a wall, and ask him what you like, and if he objects, he may object to me. He turned her hand over and closed her fingers on it, and his hands were warm, and neither of them said anything for a moment that went on slightly too long. Do not lose it. My grandmother would rise out of the crypt. Casimir. Yes. She had a great many things she might have said. What came out was, why me? Because you walked out of this hall in front of the whole realm and did not stumble, he said. And because you are the only person in Valemore who has never once wanted anything from me. Then the dawn bell went, and the two of them went out through the side passage toward the east stair, because it was the quickest way to the steward's rooms. Aloan was 4 steps up when she stopped. Back. What? Back. She had his sleeve. She hauled him down 2 steps and put herself in front of him. Cut wood. Fresh cut wood. And lamp oil, where there is no lamp. The stair is stone. The 3rd tread from the turn is not. That one has been boarded since the spring. She went up on her toes, and in the gray light through the arrow slit, she could see the seam where the board had been lifted and put back. Somebody has been at it in the night. Behind them, at the bottom of the stair, a voice said, Your Grace the steward is asking for. It was a runner, a boy of 15 with a satchel, and he came past them at a jog, because a runner's whole pride is that he never slows down. Loan shouted. She got a hand on the back of his collar. She was half a heartbeat. Too slow. The 3rd tread went out from under him, with a crack like a shot, and the whole boarded section peeled away into the shaft, and Aloan went down on her face, with the boy's collar in her fist, and both his legs in nothing at all. He screamed. She held. Her shoulder came out of its socket with a sound she felt rather than heard, and she held. And Casimir got his arms round the boy's chest and hauled him up onto the flags. And the 3 of them lay in a heap on the east stair, while 40 feet of splintered board went down the shaft and hit the bottom. Nobody said anything for a while. Your arm, Casimir said. It comes out. It has before. Aloan got up onto her knees, white to the lips, and looked at the boy, shaking and entirely unhurt. Who told you the king was on the east stair? The boy's mouth opened and shut. Nobody, he said. Steward Osgood sent me to the hall. He said, run and take the east stair, it is quicker. Osgood, the steward, was found at first light the next morning, dead behind his own desk, without a mark on him. Eloan read the room for 2 hours, and got nothing, no forced door, no struggle. The window latched from inside. The man smelled of nothing but an old man who had died. The book was gone. Of course the book was gone. He was 70, Halvard said when she came out. Men of 70 die at their desks, girl. It is practically the fashion. His heart was sound. Tamsin's mother laid him out, and says so. You have been running yourself into the ground. He put a hand on her good shoulder, careful of the strapping on the other. You are seeing a shape because you are looking for one. She let it go. She had begun, without ever deciding to, letting a great many things go with Halvard. The ember moon burned down. 40 nights became 30, and then 20. Every third day, Ivo Sorrel spoke in council about the cruelty of leaving a young woman unseated, and each time he said it, his own daughter's name went a little further round the room, without once being spoken, and Eloan worked. She read every book that had survived the steward, and put Men Against Walls with the ward's seal in her fist. She found a boot print in the crawlway beneath the hall, and went back 4 times, and on the 4th, somebody had swept it. She got nowhere, and there is a particular exhaustion in doing that very well. Meanwhile, she slept across a doorway. You may have the bed, Ondine said on the first night. I do not want it. That is not how the post works. You are guarding me from the wrong side of the door. Anyway, the girl sat down on the floor, with her back to the bedpost, 19 years old, and a very long way from home. It is not out there? What is not? Whatever it is. Ondine looked up. She had a small, clear voice, and used it precisely, which was the only weapon anyone had ever let her hold. You think I came here and took something from you? I asked to be sent home 9 times before the seating, and was refused. When I stood in front of that chair, I prayed he would not touch me. Eloan came in from the doorway and sat down on the cold floor across from her, and that was the beginning of it. It went on for weeks. The two of them, in the dark, in the east wing, talking in low voices, about small things, because the large ones were unbearable. They were the only 2 people in Ardenhold with nothing whatever to gain, which turned out to be the soundest basis for company Eloan had ever found. And Casimir came to the kennel yard, at dusk, with a wax paper of hot chestnut, to the east wall, with a question about the Sorrel Road that he did not need answered. Once, on a bad night when her shoulder had seized with a jar of something a physician had given him, which he set on the wall beside her without offering to apply it, she asked him 100 sharp questions, and he answered none. He would take the question, turn it over, hand her back something warm and useless, and she would be 3 subjects downstream before she noticed she had been steered. And the trouble was that she had stopped minding. She caught herself listening for him on the stair, and once at the arrow slit watching an empty yard at an hour when there was no reason on earth for him to cross it. She lay in the dark across Ondine's threshold, and told herself this was exactly how a clever person got made a fool of, and went on doing it. With 18 nights of the ember moon left, Halvard walked out to the muniment room alone after the hold had gone to bed. He took a lamp and his own keys and let himself in, and went along the ward rosters until he came to the fortnight before the seating. He took down 4 boards and read for a while, with his lips moving, the way he had always read. Then he fed them into the brazier, one at a time, and waited until every last one had burned. He put the empty boards back, straightened the shelf, and went to bed. 3 nights later, Ondine came out onto the east wall barefoot in the frost, to find her. You will lose toes. I have to tell you something and I cannot say it in that room. Ondine's voice was very small. A man came to call there before we left. He was not announced, and he did not stay the night. He told me what to wear, how many paces to walk, where to stop, that I was not to look at the king's face. She was crying now, the way people cry when they have not been allowed to. He said if I did it properly, my father's house would be safe. He was from here, he had the accent. I never saw his face, Undine. I did not take anything from you. I was posted here, like a letter. Eloin put both arms round her, which was nowhere in the post, and held on. Much later, when the girl was asleep and the hold had gone quiet, Eloin came back out and found Casimir, sitting on the parapet in the dark, with his boots, hanging over 80 feet of nothing. You will fall. I have never once fallen off anything in my life. It is very annoying for everybody. He did not look round. I heard. You have people listening at my door. I have people listening at every door in this hold, and it has kept the two of you alive for 3 weeks. You may shout at me in the morning. She sat down on the parapet beside him. She had not planned to. Pat. It simply happened, the way the last month had. Ask me the question, he said. Which one? The one you have carried about since the dais and have not put down. Eloin looked out at the dark shapes of the lower town. Why did you never say anything? She said. In a year, not one word I could hold. Casimir was quiet long enough that she thought he was going to steer her again. Because the last woman who sat in that chair was my mother, he said, and I watched what this hold did to her over 11 years, and she was a queen and a sorrel and better armored than you will ever be. And because the moment I said one word a man could use, you would stop being the chief tracker and start being the thing they take away from me. He turned his head. So, I came and argued with you about road tolls every week, for a year. Like a coward. Eloin looked down at her own hands. That is a very good answer, she said. It is a true one. I have not many of those left. She said nothing else, and neither did he. And after a while she laid her hand flat on the cold stone between them. And after a longer while, he put his over it, and they sat on the east wall of Ardenhold in the frost, until the moon went down. It was the last easy hour either of them would have. With 10 nights of the ember moon left, the hold had stopped pretending. Ivo Sorrel came to the council chamber with a written petition and 40 seals on it and read the whole thing aloud in a voice like a man laying flowers on a grave, that the realm could not go on with a Luna, named and unseated. That the Calder girl was being cruelly used. That the king had shown, by his own public act, that he did not intend to complete the seating, and that the council must therefore prepare to exercise its ancient right at the last dark of the moon. He was very sorry about all of it. He said so 4 times. Eloin stood at the back with her hand on the ward seal, and watched 20 grown men fail to look at the king. Afterwards, she found Casimir in the muniment room, alone, sitting on the floor between the shelves, with his back against the stone and a lamp guttering beside him, and she had never in her life seen a man look so finished. Get up. In a moment, Casimir. Do you know what the joke is? He said to the ceiling. The joke is that they are right. Not about the girl, about me. I have been king for 11 years and I have spent every one of them being the shape the room needed so that nobody would look too closely. And notice there was nothing underneath it. My father held this realm with his hands. I hold it by being liked. He laughed. And it was a terrible sound. And the moment I did one single thing that was not likable, it took them 30 nights to start writing the petition. Eloin sat down on the floor beside him, because standing over him felt obscene. There is something underneath it, she said. You have not seen it. I have seen it for a year. She kept her voice flat because she did not trust it otherwise. You came and sat on a crate in the mud and let a tracker shout at you about road tolls, and then you went away and fixed the road. You did not tell me you had fixed it. I found out in the spring from a carter. She turned her head. A man with nothing underneath does not do that. There is nobody to see it. Casimir did not move for a long moment. Then he reached over and took her hand, and it was not a gesture. It was a man holding on to something, and Eloin's whole world came apart. It went through her palm and up her arm and into the middle of her chest and stopped there. And it was not desire. She knew desire. She had been ill with it for a month. This was something else entirely. Grief and terror and a raw, exhausted tenderness, all of it distinct and detailed, and none of it hers, pouring into her through the place where their hands met. She could feel him. She could feel what it was like to be him. Eloan tore her hand away and got up so fast, she knocked the lamp over. Eloan, no, you felt that. He was on his feet. His eyes had gone wide and dark, and there was something in his face that frightened her more than the petition had. Do not tell me you did not feel that. I felt you. I felt you go cold when Sorrel said the girl's name. It is a cold room, and I have been awake for 3 days. Eloan. It was nothing. She heard her own voice do it, flat and hard, the way she had heard herself do it 100 times to men on the North Road. It was a cold room. That is all it was. Casimir stood very still. She watched it happen to him. She watched the thing in his face fold itself up and go away, and what came back in its place was courteous and pleasant and absolutely nothing, and she understood in that second exactly what he had meant about being the shape the room needed. Of course, he said. Forgive me. Casimir, it is late, Warden. You should be at your post. She went. She got the whole way to the east wing before her hands stopped shaking, and she was still standing outside the door telling herself she had done the sensible thing when she smelled it. Sweet, green, underneath the wood smoke and the rushes. Sweet the way nothing in a stone corridor is ever sweet. Eloan went through the door of Ondine's chamber without touching the latch. The girl was sitting up in bed, with a cup in both hands and her mouth open to speak, and there was a maid by the fire that Eloan had never seen in her life, and the whole room stank of crushed green. She crossed the floor in 3 strides and knocked the cup out of Ondine's hands. It went into the fire. The fire went up green and blue and hissed like something alive, and Ondine screamed, and the maid was already at the window, and Eloan got a fist in the back of her dress and put her into the wall hard enough to shake the shutters, and then Corbett was there and 2 of the ward behind him, and it was over. Ondine had swallowed none of it. Eloan made her prove it 3 times. The maid said nothing at all. She said nothing while they held her. And she said nothing while they carried her down, and she said nothing in the cell under the North Tower. And when Eloan went back at the turn of the watch to try again, the woman was dead on the floor of a locked room, and there was not a mark on her either. Dutch Casimir came at the 3rd bell. He looked at the body. He looked at the cell door, which had been bolted from the outside all night by 2 men of the ward who would both have died for him. Nobody hears of this, he said. Eloan turned round. Your Grace. Not the council, not the town, not the Calder party. His voice was perfectly steady. You will write nothing in the ward book. You will tell Corbett the woman was a thief, and he will believe you, because he loves you, and you will not under any circumstances discuss it with the master of the ward. The last one landed in her like a stone in a pond. Say that again. You heard me. That is Halvard. Eloan came round the body toward him. He has held this hold for 30 years. There is a woman dead in his cells, and you want me to keep it from him. Yes. Why? Because I am asking you to. He said it quietly. 10 nights, Eloan. Give me 10 nights, and then ask me anything you like, and I will answer all of it. I swear to you on my mother's chair. But not tonight. Tonight I need you to trust me without a reason. And the awful thing, the thing she would take out and look at later, and hate herself for, was that she wanted to. She stood in a cell, with a dead woman at her feet, and looked at a man who had lied to her about nothing yet, and told her the truth about very little, and every part of her that had sat on that parapet in the frost wanted to say, yes. All right, she said. Relief went through him so plainly, it was almost hard to watch. He touched her face, quick and careless and grateful, and she felt it again through the contact, that flood of him, and he saw her feel it, and neither of them said one word about it. Then he went out. Lowen stood in the cell for a count of 30. Then she followed him. She was very good at it. She had followed men over open ground and through crowded markets, and she had never once been made. And she went up through the North Tower and along the gallery and down the service stair behind him at 40 paces without breathing hard. He did not go to his own chambers. He did not go to the council. He went along the cold passage behind the buttery, and out through the little door into the great hall of Ardenhold. And Aloin came through it 8 breaths later, and stopped dead. There was a lamp on the dais. Steward Osgood's underclerk was lying on the steps below the Luna's chair, with his head turned away from her and one arm folded under him, and he was not moving, and he was never going to move again. And the Alpha King of Vilemore was kneeling over him with a blade in his hand. Casimir looked up. Aloin did not remember drawing. She was simply aware, somewhere a long way off, that her sword was out and level, and that the point of it was at the throat of the man she had let hold her hand on the east wall, and that her arm was perfectly steady, because it always was, because that was the one thing she had ever been any good at. Aloin, Casimir said, very calmly, I need you to put that down and listen to me. He has been dead 4 hours, Aloin said. The sword did not move. Neither did the king. Say that again. 4 hours. Perhaps 5. Her voice came out of somewhere far away and did not belong to her. You have been in a council chamber and a cell since the 3rd bell. I know where you have been, because I have been behind you since the cell, she swallowed. So put the blade down, and tell me why you are holding it. Casimir opened his hand. The knife rang on the stone. It is his own, he said. It was under him. I turned him over to see whether he had been marked, and it came out with him. Aloin lowered her sword because her arm had begun to shake, and she would not let him see it. He is the 3rd cent, Casimir said. Under the chair. I had it an hour after. You gave me the wax and the cold iron. Because a man who seals things is a man who writes them, and there is only one clerk in this hold, trusted with a seal and no name of his own. Somebody came for him first. Then we have lost him. We have lost the only mouth I had. He sat down on the dais steps beside the body, and he looked in the lamplight about 100 years old. 10 nights, Aloin. She did not sit. She stood over him with the sword hanging at her side, and made herself say the thing she had been carrying up 2 flights of stairs. You told me a month ago that something was put in front of you before the seating. Tell me what it was. No, Casimir. I have said no to you about this 4 times and I will go on saying it, and you are going to hate me, and I am going to let you. There is a man dead at your feet who is going to answer it for me. Her voice cracked, which she had not permitted and could not stop. You have run out of the right to say no. Casimir put his head back against the stone. Then he told her. Halvard came to me. 11 days before the seating, he said. He came at night, alone, without asking for the audience, which he had never done in 30 years. He brought a satchel. In the satchel were 9 sworn depositions, 4 requisition books, and a ledger in a hand I did not know, and all of it together said the same thing, very carefully, over 4 years. That the ward of Ardenhold had been bled steadily and expertly, that the spears requisitioned and never delivered had gone out through the Sorrel Road under a chief tracker's mark, that the men who died on the High Bend died because somebody who knew the ground told other men where to stand. Aloin heard it. She did not understand it yet. It was only sound. Whose mark? She said. Gakshmir looked up at her, and there was nothing in his face but grief. Yours. The great hall of Ardenhold went a long way away. That is not, she said. I have never in my life. Elowen, I know. He was on his feet now and he did not come toward her. It took me 2 days to be certain, and I have been certain since. And it does not matter in the slightest, because it was perfect. It was 4 years in the making, and every mark on it was yours, and there is not a man on that council who would have looked past it. He gave me a month to consider. and then he told me the price. Ondine, Ondine, he said it flatly. Name the Calder girl at the seating and seat her. And the satchel goes in a fire, and the chief tracker of Ardenhold goes on reading roads for the rest of her life, and never knows a thing about it. Refuse, and it goes to the council on the same night. And there is no version of that morning where you are still alive at the end of it. Eloin put her hand out and found the edge of the high table and held it. You named her, she said. I named her. I could not make my own mouth do it, so I let a herald do it, and I have hated myself for the cowardice every hour since. He said it evenly. And then I stood there with my hand on that chair, and understood that seating her was the part he wanted, because a seated Luna cannot be unseated, and a king with a foreign wife has no friends in his own council. And I would have spent the rest of my reign doing whatever the master of the ward told me to do. So, I took my hand off it, and I bought 40 knights. To find the proof, to find one thing not one man alive could argue with, because I cannot arrest him, Eloin. He holds the ward and the roads and the loyalty of every soldier in this hold, and he has held them since before I could walk. If I took him on 9/10 of a case, there would be blood in this yard by morning, and the satchel would go to the council anyway, and you would hang for it. His voice finally went. So I put you where he could not reach you, and I gave you my grandmother's ring. And I did not tell you, because the moment you knew, you would have gone straight at him, and he would have opened the satchel, and I would have watched them take you. For a long moment neither of them said anything. Then Eloin said, No, Eloin, no, not Halvard. She was shaking her head and she could not stop. He found me under the granary steps. He fed me. He taught me every single thing I know how to do. Yes, Casimir said. He did. Do not. He taught you every single thing you know how to do, he said. And then he taught you that it was all you were, that the dais had never deserved you, that the finest nose in Valemore was a rarer thing than a chair. So you had better not want the chair. He came one step closer and stopped when she did not retreat. Whose words were those, Eloin? When you sat in that hall and told yourself all autumn that it would not be your name, whose voice was it saying so? She opened her mouth. Nothing came out, because she could hear it. 20 years of it, patient and kind, and always exactly on time, arriving with a coat and a cup and a hand on the shoulder at every single moment in her life when she had come near to wanting something. You should have told me, she said. I know, 40 nights. I put my body between you and a blade on that stair. I sat on that wall in the frost and let you take my hand and asked you why you never said anything, and you gave me a beautiful answer about your mother, and every word of it was a way of not telling me I was under sentence. Her eyes had spilled over, and she did not care. You let me stand in that hall in front of 400 people, and believe you had simply stopped wanting me. You let me believe that, about myself, for 40 nights? Yes, say something else. There is nothing else. He was very pale. I chose your life over your dignity, and I would choose it again tonight. And that is not an apology, because I have not got one that would be honest. Eloin wiped her face with the back of her wrist, once, and picked up her sword, and sheathed it. Eloin, he said, please. There are 9 knights and a foreign king in the East Wing, and a man in this hold who kills people in locked rooms, and I cannot. He caught himself, and made himself find better words, and could not find them. I need you. And there it was. Not I am sorry. Not I cannot lose you. Good night, your grace, she said, and she walked out. Halvard was standing at the bottom of the service stair. He never hurried. He had a lamp in one hand and his old grey coat over his shoulders, and when she came round the turn and stopped dead, he looked at her, the way he had looked at her when she was 11. Girl, he said, you are white as a sheet. And Eloin, who had spent her whole life reading things off the ground, walked straight into his arms. He lied to me, she said into his coat. All of it. I know, girl. His hands came down on her shoulders, careful of the bad one. The way he had always been careful. I hope to spare you it. I have been hoping to, since the night of the seating. Aloan let herself be held, and felt the old shape of it settle round her exactly, and thought, with a clarity that arrived like cold water, that a comfort should not fit this well. There is worse, Halvard said. I am sorry. The under-clerk is dead on the dais. She did not move. Poisoned. The same as Osgood. The same as the woman in my own cells that nobody saw fit to tell me about. And I know who has been doing it, and so do you. And you have known since that stair went out from under you. Say it then, the king. Halvard let her go, and held her at arm's length. He named a girl he did not want and would not seat her, and every soul who could say why has died quietly since. Osgood held the book. The clerk held the seal. Both gone. He has been cutting the threads back to himself, one at a time, and using you to do it. It was very good. It was so good that Aloan felt her own certainty stagger, because there had been no poison in the underclerk. There had been no anything. She had knelt beside that body an hour ago, and found nothing but a dead man, and she had told no one, and Casimir had told no one. Halvard had not said poisoned as a guess. He had said it the way a man says a thing he already knows. I want to see proof, Aloan said. You shall. He took her to the muniment room himself and lit the lamps, and brought down 4 boards of ward roster from the 3rd shelf, and laid them out and stood back, with his hands behind him. The fortnight before the seating. Read for yourself who is at the dais. Aloan bent over the boards. The hand was right. The ruling was right. The seals were right. The tallies came out, and there in the 3rd column on the 9th night was a name from the king's own household, entered plainly. Twice. She put her face closer, the way she had put it to the join of an arm and a seat on a cold morning, and breathed in oak, gall, and iron, fresh. Not 4 months fresh, days, and under it, faint and unmistakable, the smell of a brazier. She stood with her hands flat on a forgery, and understood all at once that the man who had pulled her out of the dirt when she was 11 had burned the truth in this room and written her a new one, and that everything the king had said on the dais was true. Her hand twitched toward her sword. Old instinct. Not here. Not one woman against the man who commanded every soldier in the building. Well, she said, and made her voice break. Well. Halvard's eyes sharpened. What do we do? Aloan said. The council sits at the last dark. 9 nights he came round the table. A council can hand a king a wife girl, but it cannot hand him a rope. For that they need a witness. You. I am master of the ward. They will say I am reaching for the hold. He said it gently, almost sorrowfully. It has to come from someone. No man in that room can call a liar. You hold his own ring. You have bled for him twice in front of witnesses. He put his hand on her cheek. If the king's own warden stands up and says what he did, not a soul in Vale Moor will ask her why. Yes, Aloan said. The council chamber at the last dark of the ember moon was full to the walls, and the doors had been set open, because half the hold had come and there was nowhere else to put them. Casimir sat in the great chair at the head of the table and did not look at anybody, and when Aloan came in at Halvard's shoulder his whole face lifted for half a heartbeat before he saw who she had walked in with, and then it went out like a lamp. She could not tell him. She looked at him anyway across 40 feet of packed stone and said it with nothing at all. I know. I am sorry. I should have believed you. My lords, Halvard said, I bring this with no pleasure. He laid it out. The steward, the clerk, the woman in the cell, the chair that was named and never filled. He did not accuse once. He simply put each thing down beside the last, until the shape stood up by itself, and the room made the noise a room makes when it has decided something. That is a lie, Casimir said. He would say so, Halvard said, without heat. But the king's own warden was at his side through all of it, and she holds his ring, and she has twice put her body between him and a blade. He turned. The whole room turned with him. Eloan, tell their lordships what you saw. Every face in the chamber swung to her. Eloan walked to the head of the table. I saw a forgery, she said. The room went tight as a drawn string. 9 nights ago, the master of the ward showed me 4 boards of ward roster in the muniment room and told me they were the fortnight before the seating. Her voice carried perfectly. It always had. The hand is good. The seals are good. The ink is 9 days old, and it stinks of a brazier, and I will swear that on any relic this council cares to put in front of me, and there is not a tracker in this realm who will come in here and swear against me. She is distraught, Halvard said. The underclerk was not poisoned. Eloan did not raise her voice. There was no poison in him, and no mark on him, and I am the only living soul who read that body. But the master of the ward told me he was poisoned within the hour, in a stairwell, before any man had been sent to look at him. Halvard's hand went out toward her, and it was still gentle, and it was the most frightening thing she had ever seen. My lords, Eloan said, there is a satchel in this hold. 9 sworn depositions and a ledger, all of it made against me over 4 years, and it was carried to the king 11 days before the seating, with a price attached to it. Search the master of the ward's quarters. Now while he is standing here and cannot reach them. This is grief, Halvard said. The girl has had a hard month. Then a search costs you nothing, said the Calder king quietly, and Ondine stood up. I should like to say one thing, she said, in that small, clear voice she used so precisely, and the whole chamber went silent for her. In the autumn, a man came to my father's hall who was not announced, and did not stay the night, and he told me how many paces to walk, and where to stop, and that I was not to look at the king's face. I never saw him. She turned. But I have heard him say the word girl in this room tonight, and I would know it in the dark for the rest of my life. Halvard ran. He came straight at her because she was between him and the open doors, and Eloan saw the knife come out of his sleeve half a beat before he reached her, and she was almost glad. This was the one thing in the whole of it she knew how to do. She turned into him, caught the arm at the wrist, took his weight against her hip, and put him face down on the flags, with her knee between his shoulders and the knife spinning away under the table. He heaved. Once, she held. You taught me this, Eloan said, close to his ear. On the training ground, when I was 13, you should have kept better track of what you gave me. Then, the ward had him, and they hauled him up, and half of them would not look at him, and they took him out through the open doors into a courtyard full of people who had heard every word. Sorrel was already being spoken to quietly by 2 men who had been agreeing with him an hour before. The chamber emptied itself in that hurried way rooms have, when everyone in them needs to be somewhere else. And then it was the 2 of them. Casimir had not moved from the great chair. You saved my life, he said. After everything, you still. I came to stop a traitor. Eloan picked her sword belt up off the table. That is all it was. The light in his face went down. Eloan, you were right about him, about all of it. I have spent 3 days knowing it, and it has not made one single difference to the other thing. She said it steadily, because if she did not say it steadily, she would not say it at all. You looked me in the face for 40 nights, and managed me. I would rather have hanged knowing than lived being handled. And I am glad you are alive, and you will be a good king, and I cannot trust you. I love you, he said. I know. She got the belt buckled. That is the part I cannot forgive. And she walked out through the open doors into the courtyard, where the whole of Ardenhold was standing in the dark, and every last one of them stood back to let her through. They made her master of the ward on the first day of spring, and she was very good at it, and she had always known she would be. The realm changed around her that year. Halvard sat in a cell beneath the old fort and would not speak, and the rot he had worked into the ward for 30 years came out of it a piece at a time, and the roads got safe, and the spears arrived. House Sorrel gave up 3 seats and a great deal of money, and stopped being spoken of. The Calder party went home with a treaty nobody had been forced into, and Undine wrote every month, in a small, clear hand, mostly about her brothers. And the Luna's chair stood empty. That was the thing the Hold could not stop looking at. The naming had lapsed at the last dark of the ember moon, as the law said it must, and the council's ancient right had lapsed with it in the general wreckage of the men who meant to use it, and Valemore found itself with a king of 34 and no queen and no candidate and no crisis. At the first new moon of the spring, the Hold gathered for a seating, because the law required a king to attempt one, and Casimir came up the length of the hall and stood beside the chair and said, "Not tonight," and went out again. He did it again at the second new moon, and the third. By the fourth, the whole realm had understood what it was watching, and they came anyway, in greater numbers, to watch a man stand beside an empty chair and say 2 words. Eloin stood at the back of the hall in her new coat with her hands behind her, and made her face do nothing at all. He did not write to her. He did something worse. He sent her the work, wrote accounts, ward appointments. A dispute over a mill on the Calder border. The whole tedious governance of the realm, arriving in her wardroom 3 and 4 times a week in his own hand, with a line at the bottom of each asking what she thought, and never once a word about anything else. She answered every one of them, because it was her job, and because after the 4th month, she had stopped pretending she did not go through the pile looking for his hand first. "He is not going to give up," Corbett said, at midsummer. "He will. He has had the chair moved." Eloin looked up. It was true. He had ordered the Luna's chair carried down off the dais and set at the foot of the steps where a chair has no meaning at all. And when the steward asked him where exactly it was to go, he had said, in front of 9 people, that it could stand there until somebody sensible was willing to sit in it. The Hold had talked of nothing else for a fortnight. "He is making a fool of himself," Eloin said. "He is making a fool of himself very publicly and very slowly," said Tamsin from the doorway. "And the rest of us have to stand here and watch it. And I have run out of sympathy for exactly one of the 2 of you. Get out of my wardroom." "Master of the ward," said Tamsin, and went. The bond did not help. She had shut it on the night of the council, and she kept it shut, the way you keep a door shut on a room you are not strong enough to go into. Leave a bond open, and it deepens. Deepen it, and it sets. So she held it closed through the spring and the summer, and told herself it would wither from neglect and let her alone, and every single night it sat under her ribs exactly where it had always been, warm and patient and entirely unbothered. In the 11th month, a page brought her a folded sheet with no covering letter. "Eloin, I have said everything I have, and none of it has been the right thing, which is probably the answer. At the new moon I will take the council's recommendation. It is the last useful thing I can do with the office. You have made yourself very clear, and I have made you tired, and I am going to stop now. Thank you for the road accounts. You were right about the mill." She read it twice. This is what you wanted, she told herself. She was still telling herself that 9 days later, when Corbett came into her wardroom at the black end of the night, with Tamsin at his shoulder, and both of them, the particular gray color of people who have made a very large mistake. "What?" Eloin said. "What have you done?" "He is gone." Corbett's voice went up the middle. "Not his chambers. Not the stables. Nobody has seen him since the 10th bell." She was on her feet without deciding to be. "Horses all accounted for. Coin. Untouched. His sword is on the stand, master. The trackers had his scent off the east postern, and it stops. It just stops." He swallowed. "The way it stops when a man is being carried. No bells," Eloin said. "No alarm. Wake the kennels, and I want every gate walked. Quietly. And if one word of this reaches the lower town before dawn, I will have the tongue that carried it." They moved. She stood alone in the courtyard in the cold, with the pre-dawn wind going through her coat and she knew perfectly well what the last thing left to try was, and had known it since the word gone. It is duty, she told herself. He is the king. Finding him is my job. That was not all it was. She put her hand flat on her chest and opened the bond. It came through her, like a door blown in. 11 months of it all at once. Grief first, deep and flat, and horribly familiar. The twin of the thing she had been carrying since the council chamber. Then a tired, patient shame. Then something soft and blurred and slow, thoughts coming loose at the edges and drifting. He was not being carried. He was 3 parts drunk. Eloin stood in the courtyard of Ardenhold and made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite anything else. And then she was moving, and she did not go toward the postern at all. She went to the great hall. The doors were shut. There was light under them. She put her shoulder to one and came through it, low and fast, with her hand on her hilt, braced for a blade or a body or a locked room with a dead man in it, and stopped. The hall was empty, 400 chairs and nobody in them. The lamps had burned down to almost nothing, and there was a jug on the high table and a cup on the floor, and at the foot of the dais steps, in the small plain chair that had stood cold for 11 years, and then for one more. The Alpha King of Vielmore was sitting with his head back and his collar open, and his legs stretched out in front of him like a man on a riverbank. "Ah," Casimir said. "There you are. Get up. I am extremely comfortable. The entire ward is out. The trackers lost you at the postern, and Corbett thinks you have been taken, and Tamsin is walking the west gate in her nightclothes." Eloin came down the hall toward him and heard her own voice shaking, and could do nothing about it. "You went out of a postern at the 10th bell, with no word and no guard." "I went for a walk," he considered. "I came back." "You are sitting in the Luna's chair." "I am. It is a terrible chair. My mother complained about it for years, and nobody ever did anything, and I have sat in it for 4 hours now. And I can tell you she was entirely right." He tipped his head to look at her. It wanted a cushion. That is all it ever wanted. 1,000 years of empire, and nobody thought to put a cushion on it. Eloin stopped in front of him. "Why are you in it?" "Because nobody else will be," Casimir said, and it seemed unkind to leave it sitting there by itself. And through the open bond she felt it hit him, all of it at once, unguarded and enormous. Relief, disbelief, a joy so undefended it was hard to stand in front of. "You opened it," he said. "I thought you were dying. You opened it." "Do not, a year." He got up out of the chair, not steadily, and stood there swaying gently in the ruin of his shirt. "A year of a door shut in my face, and you opened it in a courtyard because you thought I might be hurt, and you are going to stand there and tell me it was the ward roster. It was duty." "It was not duty, and you are a coward," Casimir said. Eloin's head came up. "What? You heard me? You would rather strangle a bond between 2 living souls than risk being made a fool of twice." He put one hand on the back of the chair to keep himself upright and pointed at her with the other, which wavered. "He told you for 20 years that you were a nose. And you have spent a year in a wardroom, proving him right, and calling it work, and doing it beautifully, and I have watched you do it, and it has been the worst year of my life." She stood there in the empty hall. The awful part was not that it was cruel. The awful part was that he had said it kindly, and that it was true, and that she had known it was true since about the 4th month. "That is a very good answer," she said. She heard the words come out of her own mouth and heard exactly where she had got them. "It is a true one," he swayed. "I have not many of those left. You are drunk. Yes, it has been a large night." He sat down again, mostly involuntarily, and looked up at her from the Luna's chair with his hair a complete disaster. "Eloin, no. Sit down, Casimir. Not in it, beside it. On the step. I am not going to ask you the other thing. I said I would stop, and I am stopping. I am simply asking you to sit on a step in an empty room with a man who has had rather a lot of wine." He shut his eyes. "Please." I have missed you so much, I have started talking to furniture. Eloan looked at him for a long moment. Then she sat down on the bottom step of the dais, with her back against the arm of the Luna's chair, and after a while his hand came down onto her shoulder, and she let it stay there. There is a seating at the new moon, she said, to the empty hall. There is. I have told the council, I will take their recommendation, withdraw it. Casimir went very still above her. Eloan, withdraw it, and stand up in front of the whole realm at the new moon and ask me then. She did not turn round. Sober, in your own voice, out of your own mouth, not a herald's. And I will tell you in front of all of them. Tell me what? Ask me at the seating, said Eloan, and find out. The hall was fuller than it had been for the first one. People had come up from the lower town and in off the Calder road, and stood 4 deep at the back, and the Calder envoy had a place at the high table, and Undine of the Calder Pax, who had been married since the autumn, to a man of her own choosing, sat in it and grinned at Eloan across the whole length of the room like a girl at a fair. Nobody had put a cushion on the chair. Eloan had checked twice. At the king's left hand, where the chief tracker of Ardenhold had sat on the night of the first one, the place stood empty, and everyone in the hall knew why, and nobody said a word about it. Dogismir came up the length of the hall without hurrying. He did not send for a herald, he did not take out a paper. Eloan Ash, he said in his own voice, and the whole realm heard him. She walked the floor, she did not stumble. She had not stumbled the last time either, going the other way, and there was a symmetry in that which she intended to think about at some length later, when there were fewer people looking. He put his own hand on her shoulder and sat her down in a chair, and the hall came apart, and the noise of it went up and out through the doors into a courtyard packed to the walls, and down the hill into the lower town where the bells had already started. And under all of it, bent close, with the whole of Valemore shouting and not one soul near enough to hear, Casimir said something short. Eloan heard every word. She had been the only person in the realm who missed it the first time. It seemed only fair. You are certain, he said. No, taking it back, I proposed the terms, said Eloan. You only agreed to them. Later, when the hall had emptied and the lamps were low and the two of them were the last people in it, she made him fetch a cushion.